Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. I'm Manny Diaz. This week, our special guest is Matthew Wiz Buckley. He is a former Top Gun pilot, former FA-18 pilot, mental health advocate, and founder of No Fallen Heroes Foundation. Matthew Wiz, if you will, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Manny. Yep, it's Matthew to my mom or my wife. If I'm in trouble, it's Wiz to everybody else. So
there we go. Well, you are a big advocate of psychedelics to help with PTSD, well, help veterans with struggling with PTSD. We had you on the program a few years ago, and I really wanted to have you on again to see the progression, you know, of where you're at with psychedelics. I know it's still looked at as an illegal drug, if you will. We're going to get into a lot of these different things, but you've been described as a Top Gun with a mission beyond the cockpit. When did you realize the hardest battles weren't in the air, but after you landed?
Well, Manny, it's been kind of a rolling train wreck, so to speak. Childhood trauma. Most folks that go into the military maybe didn't have the best childhood. So I had horrific childhood trauma. I lost a sister to a drunk driver when she was 19, which just was a hand grenade in the middle of my family. And more or less, I lost my parents technically at that point. They checked out. I was sexually abused. And then flying fighters for 15 years. I lost 16 buddies. And then along the way, I've lost 4 F-18 brothers to suicide. And then transitioning out of the military and going to a Wall Street firm was an absolute horror. I left the fighter squadron where you trust the men and women with your life, or they're just not in that organization for long, to a Wall Street firm where I couldn't trust somebody to watch my wallet for 5 minutes when I went to the head. So disconnected from God, my bride, my family, my mission. So I was spiraling the drain, drugs, alcohol. And then after my last F-18 brother took his own life, he was my best friend. He was a groomsman in my wedding, Swede, Captain Eric Swenson, a Marine F-18 pilot. I looked at my bride and I said, we got to do something to end veteran suicide. But I stood in front of a whiteboard and said, how do you keep a veteran from killing themselves? Help them pay the rent, write a resume, buy a suit. And that's when a buddy of mine said, hey, there's a group of combat veterans with PTSD, SEALs, Special Forces. They go down to Mexico and they do psychedelic-assisted therapy. And there's a really cool group going in a couple of weeks. Would you want to go? And I said, man, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs. It sounds like a great time. I had no idea what I was getting into. So just give you the cliff notes. Marcus Luttrell, famous Navy SEAL, his brother Morgan Luttrell, a congressman in Texas, who also healed with psychedelic-assisted therapy. So a group of us went down, and I've done some challenging things in my life, Manny. This was without a doubt one of the most challenging. It was not fun. It was not recreational, but I got 40 years of therapy in about 14 hours. So I got home from that retreat and I said, this is how we're going to end veterans suicide. So I started the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. And in the past 5 years, we've been giving grants to veterans, first responders, and their family members, because God bless my wife, she served too, having to put up with me, to heal with these compounds.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. During the first journey there to Mexico, was there a moment where something just finally clicked? An image, voice, realization that you necessarily couldn't reach before?
All the above. I was raised Irish Catholic, South Jersey, South Philadelphia. It didn't get any more Catholic than the Buckleys. I was an altar boy. I was terrified of God, right? You miss Mass on Sunday, you're going to burn in hell forever type of stuff. Terrified of God. Manny, on this sacrament, there was God right there, the brightest, whitest light, full of love, empathy, compassion, forgiveness. I fell to my knees, man, and I begged for forgiveness. I'm not the best husband, father, human. I'm a drunk, and not that God had hands, but just with a wave of energy, Manny, it was gone. He said, Matthew, I got those things. That's not you. I don't make imperfect things. I'm going to take that stuff. Rise. Let me show you what you can do. And Manny, it was the most incredible moment. Well, marrying my bride and having my 3 kids, all tied for first. But this was with that. This experience put all of that into perspective, and healed so much trauma from childhood to military. It destroyed alcohol in my life, Manny. So up to about a year after sitting with the sacrament once, if I looked at alcohol, if I smelled, if somebody's drinking near me, it made me dry heave. And I was a drinker, Manny. It destroyed alcohol in my life. So, I said, this is how we're going to end veteran suicide. It wasn't fun. It wasn't recreational. It isn't for everybody, Manny. To be clear, there are so many different healing modalities: yoga, breath work, meditation, climbing a mountain in Nepal, walking on the beach, prayer, whatever it is. But I tell people that radical trauma might need radical healing. And this was definitely radical healing for me.
Tell me, I think it was roughly about 2 years ago that we did this conversation. How far have you come, since that point, being able to kind of talk to people about your journey, about psychedelics, certainly when it comes to PTSD and veterans?
Manny, it shows you what a difference 2 years can make. Back in May, I walked into the VA headquarters in Washington, D.C., not as a protester, at the invitation of Secretary Collins. So I met with Secretary Collins. He shook my hand and he looked me dead in the eyes and he said, "Wiz, if anybody's going to do this, it's going to be us, and it's going to be now." So that was a very surreal moment. A couple days around that meeting, he was in a cabinet meeting. And President Trump, I've never heard a president use these words: "What's going on with veteran suicide?" I about fell out of my chair, Manny. I'm like, oh my God. Secretary Collins said, "Well, Mr. President, we're throwing a lot of money at veteran suicide, and the numbers are staying the same, if not going up. But there are some veteran nonprofits out there looking into psychedelics. We got to test and everything, make sure they're safe. But they're showing a lot of promise." Manny, my wife ran in the office. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was yelling at the top of my lungs. I couldn't believe what I saw. Fast forward a year after that, I've started my own, and the word church makes my skin crawl just a little bit. I'm a recovering Catholic. I started an entheogenic church called Sacred Warrior Fellowship, based here in Florida. The world would be a much better place if people actually took responsibility for their healing. I'm not joking when I say this, Manny. If I could kidnap Vladimir Putin and Zelensky and take them on a retreat, the war would be over. That's not a joke. It's not hyperbole. It's a fact.
Well, coming up after the break, we're talking policy and spirituality surrounding psychedelics and veterans right here on Big Country Politics. That's correct.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, Matthew, Wiz, if you will, the VA's trials talk about outcomes and symptom reduction. You've talked about transformation. How do you measure healing when it's not just about clinical benchmarks and spiritual rebirth?
You know what? I'm glad you're asking this question, because I'm going to lead with something bad that needs to be addressed pretty quick by the VA and our lawmakers. About 3 years ago, Manny, I was in D.C. Congressman's name isn't important, but behind closed doors, this guy looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Wiz, I love what you're doing. You're going to have a problem with the big pharma and the alcohol and tobacco folks." And I was like, what do you mean me? Isn't that your job? But I also hit him with all the veteran suicide numbers, whether it's 18, 22, you pick a number, 44. I've seen numbers as high as 44 veterans a day. Let's just meet in the middle and say 22. I was hitting him with those numbers. And he really didn't seem to be moved that much by the deaths. So I had to actually break out my talking points card. I went to the bottom where it talked about costs. I said, "Well, Congressman, the VA spends about $50 billion a year on PTS therapy." That's when he leaned forward in his chair and he's like, "Oh, okay, well, now you're talking." And he said, "Man, hand to God," he said, "Wiz, if we heal these, you said you were healed. If we heal these guys and these gals, we don't have to pay them their disability anymore, right? Because they're healed." I'm like, oh my God.
Now you're talking his numbers.
He was an appropriator too. That's all he cared about was the money. So if we heal these veterans, we don't have to pay them their disability. I'm like, are you kidding me? This guy suffered for 10 years of PTS. We got him something that came out of Mother Earth that healed him, and you're going to stop paying him his disability? You want to see the suicide numbers jump even more? What a disgrace. How about you call it, it's not a disability payment anymore. It's a thank you payment. It's a, I'm sorry we sent you to war payment. So as soon as you mention the word healing and stuff like that, I'm like, you know what? I got to bring this up, because I actually tagged Secretary Collins in a video, because I know of a veteran recently, 82nd Airborne vet, Iraq, Afghanistan, who killed himself. He was a husband, a father, and a son. He knew about the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, and so did his parents. He said he didn't reach out for treatment because he was worried he was going to lose his benefits. That is a 100% preventable suicide. So I reached out to Secretary Collins. I made a social media video. I never heard a word. So these are questions, man, that need to start being answered before we start healing people. Like, hey, you're healed. By the way, your payments stop in 30 days. What an absolute disgrace. It's awful.
Wiz, let me ask you this. Is there bipartisan support when it comes to research and support for this?
Manny, last year or 2 years ago, I remember reading a headline that said AOC and Dan Crenshaw, and I didn't want to read the rest of the headline. What, with fist fight, agree on psychedelic-assisted therapy for veterans. So, Manny, this is the one issue. I can't even remember the last time like both parties were like, hey, we totally agree on this. So this is a bipartisan issue. I got to be honest, though, when I was in D.C. 3 years ago, I thought the Democrats were already there. My stereotype was Mala B wearing, drug rug, anti-war, Democrat hippies. You guys are already there. I was wrong. They were actually the ones that were in bed with Big Pharma, all the COVID stuff and everything like that. It's the Republicans, the law and order Republicans, who I thought would be the hardest to sell on this. When I give them my 10 to 15 minute speech, or Congressman Luttrell tells them, or Morgan Luttrell, Governor Rick Perry, it doesn't get any more law and order than
about him.
Former Governor Rick Perry. He runs the Americans for Ibogaine initiative now. So it's interesting. It's almost like the parties have reversed. It's the Republicans now that are like very pro psychedelics if it's helping veterans, first responders, and their family members. But a lot of the Democrats, to your point, are there. We just need to, it's a circular firing squad, Manny. When I talk to the folks at the VA, they look at me and say, Wiz, we want to do this. You need to talk to the lawmakers. I talk to the lawmakers, Manny, and they say you need to go talk to the VA. It's literally a circular firing squad. It's a stupid standoff. Somebody needs to be in the middle of that circle and stand up and go, yes. And it's got to be President Trump. If President Trump knew veterans were sneaking across the border south into Mexico to treat trauma that they incurred serving this country, I think he would flip out and act immediately. I don't think he's gotten that message yet, though.
Wiz, we have about 90 seconds. Some religious circles will view psychedelics with skepticism or even condemnation. How do you reconcile what you've experienced with traditional Christian beliefs? You said you grew up, a staunch Catholic.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the word, Manny. It's called experience. I experienced God not in a pew. I experienced God on a mattress, on a home, on the floor in Mexico. In my experience, Manny, God meets each one of us where we are. If you don't need something like this to experience God, great for you. I did. I was circling the drain, my brother, and this is how God decided to reveal himself to me. And I've never been more spiritual and religious. Don't judge. Just hold space for these veterans. If this compound brought me closer to God, more religious, and trying to help save and change others' lives, wouldn't you support something like that? I don't judge anybody else, bro. I just ask for them to be respectful of my beliefs and my experiences as well.
Do you ever get that psychedelics might be, associated with the occult or anything like that?
No, that's a phrase usually thrown out that people that have no idea what they're talking about or who have never experienced it. That's the 1970s government talking point. All of that stuff has been debunked. Like I said, over 100 people helped so far. Ain't nobody been on one of our retreats who said they experienced Satan or evil or anything like that. Absolutely not. Those are stale, old talking points. I'm living truth that these have the power to dissolve ego and reconnect us with God. What does ego stand for? Edge God out. when that ego, it doesn't get any more ego than a Navy fighter pilot, Manny. When that dissolved and I got to see that God is there, he never left. He has always been and always will be. It saved and changed my life.
Yeah. Well, Wiz, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for putting a spotlight on this, Manny. You're a great American. Thank you.
Well, for Matthew Wiz Buckley, former Top Gun pilot and advocate for spiritual healing, I'm Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation right here on Big Country Politics. We'll see you next time. God bless.